Hi folks, it's Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. It's Friday, the 9th of February, and one of my last videos about the Demaree method really was so popular, it took me a bit by surprise. So I thought you'd like to see the other two ways that I really like to manipulate my hives to get maximum honey production. So what I'm going to do is show you an example of 3 different hives that you might typically have, what I would typically get from those 3 hives, and what I'd get if I did these 3 different manipulations to maximize honey production. Okay, so let's take the example of a typical hobbyist apiary, we'll say with 3 colonies. And typically we may have 3 colonies, bottom board here, each with 2 brood chambers coming into the spring. And as these colonies grow, the brood chambers are gradually filling up with brood. So you've got a queen free to go in all 3 colonies. But as is typical in different hives, you will get differences in their performance. And so you might have this one being really strong and this one being intermediate and this one being lagging a bit behind. Not very much, but let's say you can usually tell these hives, certain ones are going to do really well in the year and certain ones are going to do not as well. And of course, you could balance the hives, which gives you some, it gives you a more reliability. But let's say here's another option, but let's say this one looks set to produce, going to produce about a super of honey, and that might be circa 30 pounds. This one's looking really strong, and it looks set to produce maybe 3 supers by the end of the year. And this one's your intermediate one. This one may be on course to produce about 60 pounds of honey per year. So that's going to be what, 60, 90, 150, 100, 190 pounds of honey in the year, which would be not a bad average at all. That's about a bit over 60-pound average. It's about 60-pound average. No, it's not. 193, 33, 15, 16, 17, 18, 180 pounds. The good thing about these videos is you can always laugh at both my spelling and my math. So that must be why they're so popular, because they're much more entertaining. You can see all the mistakes I make. But there we go. Let's say you're on course for these 3 hobbyist hives to produce about 180 pounds. If left to their own devices, you've got to, of course, we want to remember, we've got, say, a queen excluder here, a queen excluder here, and a queen excluder here. Keeping a double brood chamber, which as this colony grows, it's going to have a queen is going to be laying brood in there. And as the season goes on, remember, they're going to start putting honey in here. And so by the time we're into the mid to late summer, this area here is filling up with honey as well. So in effect, you're confining the queen to less and less space over a period of time. But in the meantime, during the peak of the honey flow, which let's say here is in May to early July, further south we might be talking March, April, May. So the key thing is to know when your honey flow, most of your honey is produced. So here in Maine, I would say it's June, early July. We also get another little peak later in September or October, no, not October, it's too late then. September is usually a fall honey flow, sometimes in August. Anyway, let's look at different alternatives. What if we chose to do something different with each of these hives? So, for example, with these hives, we're going to go into the spring. We've got 3 nice hives. We go into the winter with 3. Maybe we're going to lose one. Maybe we're not. We've only got 3 hives going into the winter. But let's say here, let's take, this is another example, another option. Why don't we take this colony, which is clearly doing better than the others, and we're going to do a Demaree split on this hive, or a Demaree manipulation. So we've got in this hive, we've probably got brood, let's say, we've got brood here, 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 here. Some of it's capped, some of it's open brood. And what we're going to do, as we did in the last video, we're going to take a new brood chamber. We're going to put 1 frame of brood in there, capped brood that is, and the queen. And if we need to, you're going to shake all the bees down into this super in order to get the queen down in here, so we know the queen is there. If you can find the queen, so much the better. We're going to put a queen excluder on. Then we're going to put some honey supers on. And 1 or 2 of these may have already been on the hive. They're going to be here. And what we're going to do is put at least a couple of supers on here and put the brood chambers, the 2 brood chambers on top here with all the rest of that brood up here. Okay. Over a period of time, and depending when you do this in the breeding season, you're going to have a couple of different options. But remember, having done this manipulation, we've got to go back and check for queen cells in these 2 supers in particular. And I think in the last video I said 7 days. A good friend of mine has pointed out that on occasion, it's a rare occasion, but you do occasionally get queen cells after the 7th day. They're pretty bad queen cells because they're using eggs that are 2 days beyond having hatched, but occasionally they do it. So it's probably a good idea to do this inspection on day 8 or day 9 after this manipulation, still well before any potential queen cells up here would have been swarming. So check after 8 to 9 days for queen cells. Now, here in Maine, and normally, if you've looked at my Demaree split videos, they often are late in June, sometimes even July before I'm getting to them, but they're late in June. And for me, that's because I make most of my income selling nucleus colonies. And so it's taken later for me to get to this stage. But if you want to maximize honey production and you're not making nukes with your hives here, what you can do is do this as soon as the colonies are big enough to do it with, to do this split. As soon as the population is enough that you're not going to have too low a density of bees, and there's a risk of getting small hive beetles or wax moths or something like that, particularly in the southern states. So we're talking about a colony that was probably at this stage, we're going to be doing that split. So it was 2 supers and a super full of bees working on honey. So you had effectively 2.5 supers here. You're throwing on another honey super and maybe another deep. They've probably got enough bees to look after this, especially as this is probably foundation. It could be drawn comb. Drawn comb, you're going to have even faster results. But it's a great way to get foundation drawn as well. But after a month or so, this brood chamber is going to be full of brood again. Only they're going to, now she's confined to 10 frames, it might be pretty packed. Now, if it is early in the brood season, there could be a risk that they want to swarm again. So what do? Do that same manipulation again. Put another deep super on here. Put the queen down here. Put your single frame of capped brood there. And I would still say put drawn frames if you've got them, but foundation, maybe a mixture of drawn frames and foundation, because they're going to draw it if you've still got the honey flow on. Now, what we've got here is original colony, but we've moved this brood chamber up to here, and that too now becomes a honey super. I've done a lot of these manipulations. I've not done it twice because I do it late in the season, but had I done it, say, 3 weeks earlier, maybe a little longer than that, I could certainly have done this on a typical year where the honey flow continued. And so this gives me some real opportunity to produce some real honey, because normally what I would say I get, I would say typically I get 50 pounds of honey out of that, 50 pounds of honey out of that, 30 pounds of honey out of that one, and maybe another 30 pounds of honey out of that one. So just this hive alone can make me 160 pounds. With this one, you've got plus another 50-ish, you get about 210 pounds just from this hive, from that one hive. You're already more than you produced from all 3 of these colonies here. This typically works really, really well. Again, you're gonna have to check for the queen cells here after about 8 to 9 days. But if you've got a honey flow that lasts from late May till early July, you can do 2 of these manipulations. If you start off with your strongest colony in the spring, and you ensure that you don't get swarming this way, as long as you're thorough about checking for your queen cells. Okay, so let's take your medium hive. So this is the Demaree. What I'm going to do with this one, a different example, is a single brood chamber. Chamber management. Single brood chamber management. So what I would do with this hive is, again, I'm going to take my colony, which has got lots of brood in it. Maybe not quite as much as that one had, but it's still got plenty. I want to do this ideally a couple of weeks, just as the honey flow is about to kick into top gear. And what I do is I ensure that the queen is in the lower brood chamber, and I make sure she's down here, again, probably by shaking all the bees down if I want to do it quickly, or if I find the queen, I'll do that. Then I'll put my queen excluder on. Remember the queen excluder here as well. I'm putting my queen excluder on and confining it to a single brood chamber. Now, I've got my upper brood chamber. And if you want to sort of integrate Demaree method with my normal single brood chamber management, I'll just put the queen excluder on and have all my upstairs brood become a honey super. But what we can also do is pack this upper brood chamber with as much brood as you can. So you can get lots and lots and lots of brood up here. You may end up with 2 or 3 frames of brood down here, and put all the rest of these ones as open space. Open comb, undrawn or drawn comb, or you can put some foundation in there as well. The bees are going to quickly fill it up. Any frames you put down here, ideally if they're capped brood, so much the better. Okay, now you're going to need to have honey supers on here, because I will typically get 3 supers of honey from that, plus this. Maybe 2, but anyway, I will typically get 50 pounds of honey from this one, 30 pounds of honey from that, 30 pounds of honey from that, and 30 pounds of honey from that. If you do this manipulation on a good season, sometimes I won't get this this one filled or something like that. Maybe let's be a little more conservative, about 20, something like that. But again, we've got here about 130 pounds of honey. I've often had more than that. I've sometimes had 300 pounds from colonies like this. I've sometimes had 300 pounds of honey from hives like that. And we're not in a particularly great area for honey production. But if you manage your bees right to get big, strong colonies, you can do this. Because what's going to happen here, again, is you're going to provide the queen with room. Again, you should check at the 10-day period that there isn't queen cells. But you're less likely to get queen cells up here. And the reason is that they're still in contact with the queen here. So unlike the Demaree method where you have to check that for queen cells, you often get away without even checking the upper brood chamber of your single brood chamber management because they're still in contact. But I'd still recommend it. I'd still at least tip this super back after about 8 to 9 days to be sure there's no queen cells at the bottom of that, because it's still a pretty packed brood chamber. You're not exactly drawing away the the nurse bees like you're doing with this manipulation. This really stops swarming. This one doesn't necessarily. You still have to keep an eye on this much more. So we're already making a lot more honey. Finally, what do I do with the hive here? We've got one that's on course to produce that. Let's do a couple of different things. What we can do with this one, again, let's say it's not as much brood as in the other ones. It's probably down to the queen to some extent. You may take the opportunity to requeen this hive, but what you could also do is split it into nukes. And in this particular case, because again, we want to produce honey, what I'm going to do is put 2 nukes here. One with the old queen or a replacement queen, and definitely a new queen here. And what we do then, we put our queen excluder on. We make sure there's no way for the queen to get across here so that they can get into each other. But we've got a queen excluder here. We put the other deep on here. And we pack most of that brood up here in the middle. And we'll put at least 1 frame of cat brood on both of those to give the queen something to go on and that sort of thing there. But by doing this, we do tend to have better success. It is better if you have a more established queen. This doesn't work 100% of the time. This queen will be absolutely fine, but this still works very frequently by putting a new queen in here because she's separated from the other queen and there's plenty of brood, plenty of young bees are going to go in here. It does tend to work. What you could also do is you could have, to ensure this works better and there's better queen acceptance, make that nuke up ahead of time. And keep them separate for a few days until this is established. So maybe a couple of weeks before you do this whole manipulation, get at least 1 queen going in a second nuke. And then she's to be the one that's going to go in here. So what you end up with is a nuke, the rest of the brood up here, and you're going to need honey supers on top of that. And I would say that I have in the past, I've used these ones, and to be honest, what I have done in the past with this, I've had that one full of 50 pounds. And in fact, in previous ones, I've had these another 50 pounds and another 50 pounds with these were all deeps. They weren't mediums. So I've repeated that on quite a few occasions, but let's be more conservative. Let's say they're medium supers, not deeps, but this one's a deep. So again, we've still got another 110 pounds. So between these, we've got 340, 350, 450 compared to 180 pounds. I'm not going to do the math in my head. 450 divide 180. We've got 250% more honey. That ain't bad than I would have done that way. I would say that maybe I'm being a little optimistic on some of these numbers, though I think I may be being optimistic on these numbers here. The ratios should be roughly the same. If this hive would have done this, maybe this one would have produced a bit more honey. Maybe these would have produced a little less honey. So maybe instead of 250%, 200%. Either way, these methods work really well. So things we should remember: check for queen cells after 8 to 9 days. On this one, check the survivorship of the queen, or ideally, make the queen a nuke up a week or two ahead of time so that we've got a better probability of success here. We've got, we're gonna get a lot more honey this way. It's probably gonna stop swarming from your strongest hive. The downside is, of course, you've got to find the queen, or at least shake the bees down into the lower brood chamber, and you do have to inspect them again, but you're going to get a lot more honey. You're also going to have to be prepared to be lifting some heavier honey supers, so don't do it unless you can take the honey supers off the hive as well. Maybe you'll get a little bit of help with that instead. But the other thing that's advantageous is we're confining the queen to a single brood chamber, or the equivalent of one, so your mite treatments are more effective on a single brood chamber than they are necessarily on a double brood chamber. So I find better results with mite treatments that way. The other advantage that we've got from this result is that we end up with 4 hives. 1, 2, 3, 4 over winter. So we actually have an insurance policy for next year. But it's not occupied, not used a great deal more equipment in order to do it. But we do get a lot more honey. We do get better results for mite treatments. And I would really suggest that if you've had a bit of experience doing this for several years, you've got a good base to compare it with. Try doing these 3 manipulations: the Demaree method, single brood chamber management, and a double nuke management. And I think you're going to find you make a lot more honey. I hope you found this helpful. I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. See you next time.